There lived a man, now a convicted criminal, named David. He lived a very happy life with his wife, who was his everything. His wife became pregnant, and the couple eagerly awaited their child. After 9 months, David's wife experienced labor pains. Immediately, David rushed her to the hospital, where they discovered she had complications in her pregnancy. She could not deliver normally and had to undergo a C-section operation, which would either save her or the baby, but not both. Before being taken to the operating room, David's wife called him and told him that whatever the outcome, he would have to stay strong. She made him promise that if she did not survive, he would love their baby girl as much as or more than he had loved her. David accepted the promise, but assured his wife that she would survive and they would welcome their daughter together. However, his wife expressed that she felt weaker and weaker. After this conversation, she was rushed to the operating room. David waited for hours in the hospital corridors. After several hours, the doctors came out with the baby, but without his wife. David rushed to hold his baby girl and asked the doctors about his wife's condition. They informed him that she did not survive. This news devastated David, and he dropped to the ground in despair. He began to hate the newborn baby, believing she was the cause of his wife's death. While lying on the floor, he heard his wife's voice reminding him of his promise to love their child. This gave him the strength to stand up, hold his daughter, and promise to love her more and more, even as he cried. The doctors taught him how to care for the baby, and after some time, they were discharged from the hospital. David arranged for his wife's burial. After the burial, David named his daughter Sandra, after her mother. He loved and cared for Sandra. As she grew older, her resemblance to her deceased mother became more apparent, especially when she turned 7 years old. David often called her Sandra, my always wife, and praised her whenever she did something right. David never remarried. When Sandra turned 18, he asked her to leave her room and sleep in his. They began sharing the same room and even bathing together. Sandra felt it was inappropriate but hesitated to confront her father. David was a sweet talker who convinced her there was nothing wrong with their behavior. One day, during a health education class, Sandra's teacher explained to the students, especially the girls, that it was inappropriate for them to bathe with their fathers at their age. This worried Sandra, and she decided to confront her father. When she got home, she found that her father had arranged a special dinner for the two of them. Despite the setup, Sandra was determined not to be swayed by his sweet words. "Dad, there's something I need to talk about," she said. "Sandra, my always wife, you know Daddy will always want to discuss anything you want with me," he replied. "Dad, my teacher said it's wrong for me to bathe with you, especially at my age." As soon as she finished, her father stood up in anger. "I don't ever want to hear that from you again. Nobody is taking you away from me, even if it means death," he shouted. He then swore to marry her because he saw her as his deceased wife, reincarnated in Sandra. He attempted to force her into intimacy, but Sandra screamed. Her screams alerted people outside, who smashed the door open and rescued her. They found David attempting to assault Sandra and restrained him. He was handed over to the police. David was taken to a mental hospital, where it was determined that he was mentally stable. He was charged with attempted rape and parental incest. Despite this, he insisted that Sandra was his wife. To this day, people still wonder what had gotten into David's mind. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. This scenario served as a lesson to many mothers, teaching them never to allow their husbands to bathe or share a room with their daughters once they start menstruating or develop breasts. Some speculated that David may have been possessed by the spirit of his deceased wife.